Hi, and welcome to Westeros.org on YouTube and our discussion of the 7th episode of House of the Dragon.
Very spectacular episode,
Very
especially the ending.
spectacular,
There's a lot of
yes.
spectacle in this one. I think so much so that I think this is the big thing that they talked about, like their second major set piece. I think I could be wrong, but it certainly is a sort of thing that would if you saw it in like a movie, you would go whoa.
Yeah, but you'll also get some eye rolls.
Starting with the usual episode summary, this episode begins basically where the last one ended, resolving the cliffhanger. Rhaenyra and Cyrax are now on a beach staring down sea smoke and its rider, Adam of Hull. He tells her he wants to learn the ways of dragon riders and to serve her. She asks him, well, what's your ancestry? And he admits his mother was a shipwright, but his father was of no consequence. They end up flying together to Dragonstone.
In King's Landing, Alicent is talking to Orwyle as he tends her wounded hand from the riot, and she's saying that she's been cast aside by Aemon, essentially, and despite all of her years of service, she's hated by the people and has nothing to show for it, essentially. And Alicent also glances at a rat she sees in a room and remarks that nothing is clean. And shortly after here, she calls on Sir Rickard Thorne of the King's Guard and informs him that she wants to go out into the Kingswood alone, with just him as her attendant.
So yeah, it looks like it was Leon Estermont who died but Sir Martin Rain and Sir Ned Waters survive, but they are prisoners. They're being brought out into the yard of the Red Keep, their hands bound, as Jasper Wilde and Larys Strong watch from the walls. Larys says that Aemon has decided that they will be sent to the wall. He's merciful. Jasper then tells Larys, I have news, a rumor that sea smoke was seen with a rider. Jasper offers this information to Larys to give to Aemon, but Larys kind of balks at it, and especially the chain of custody, so to speak, of this one is kind of dubious. So he's like, it might be best to keep this to ourselves. Such a dubious rumor. Let's leave it to the wind.
And then we'll continue with the story thread of Rhaenyra and Adam. She returns with Adam to Dragonstone, and the council is informed that the rider is a shipwright in Lord Corlys' service. Lord Celtigar calls him a thief. I'm not really sure how you're supposed to steal a dragon, but Rhaenyra informs the court that she has, made him her guest, and she wishes for him to be taught dragon riding and High Valyrian. Celtigar continues to question the idea of a low-born dragon rider, but Corlys says that they should wait for Rhaenyra's accounting before judging the matter.
A rather curious statement, as if they have a say. If she says this is how it goes, it ought to be. But certainly,
as if anybody has a say once the dragon said, you're riding me.
But they could kill the guy, I guess, for the different.
True, but the dragon might have something to say about that.
If it's not around, I mean.
Yeah, I'd like to see Lord Celtigar going and telling Sea Smoke, excuse me, that guy's not allowed to ride you.
Yeah. So Rhaenyra has skipped seeing her counsel, and instead she's gone to take counsel with Mysaria again, who discusses Adam and Sea Smoke. Rhaenyra kind of sees Sea Smoke's choosing Adam, and she has no idea, who is he? Why? It has to be ordained, a promise that they will find riders for Vermithor and Silverwing. Once again, the wild dragons that are supposed to be on Dragonstone are not mentioned at all. Mysaria suggests, well, instead of looking for nobles in the genealogies, you should be looking for bastards made by the Targaryen princelings over generations. And she claims to know of at least 40, that would be 80, in King's Landing alone.
Carlos was a busy princeling.
Yeah, Rhaenyra seems dubious of turning toward low-born dragon riders. I mean, this guy, this Adam, okay, but more. But Mysaria convinces her she should try.
On Dragonstone, there's also a brief and awkward scene between Adam and Corlys. Corlys grants Adam leave from his service to become a dragon rider, and then he tells him, well done, and leaves, saying nothing else. You'd think he'd give up the game at some point.
Well, but at the same time, we the previous episode did introduce this idea that maybe there's something, like he doesn't necessarily believe that he's his son, or that he doesn't think this doesn't like him. It's a bit odd.
Yeah. He's got a dragon though, anyway.
So we go back to Harrenhal now, and the new Lord newly made, raised Lord Oscar Tully, Lord Paramount of the Trident, arrives at Harrenhal, bringing the River Lords with him. And Daemon insinuates to Oscar, "Oh, well, you may have hastened his grandfather's death, but congratulations." That Oscar denies, saying, I did nothing. And Daemon expects Oscar and the River Lords to follow him. But Oscar points out there's a bit of a problem. You've made a mess of things by letting the Blackwoods run wild against the Brackens. Oscar accepts.
Yeah, that never happens.
Yeah, Oscar accepts the authority of Rhaenyra and Daemon, but the River Lords will resist following Daemon, who they hate. Daemon says, "I don't need for love. I want their swords."
So, in front of the weirwood, Daemon and Oscar meet up with the gathered River Lords, and the River Lords question following a man who kills the innocent, and Willem Blackwood says that he only did what was necessary, and presents the traitor Amos Bracken and his son. Oscar then turns the conversation to how he, too, does not love Daemon, and how he has dishonored himself and the crown, but, his grandsire swore himself to Rhaenyra, and he will honor that, but he calls Daemon loathsome.
Yeah.
Daemon warns him, and Oscar asks him quietly if he wants the River Lord army or not.
With that, Oscar proceeds to continue to, talk shit about Daemon in front of the River Lords.
Yep.
While insisting, we have to follow the word of Lord Grover. Daemon tries to play into the saying, "Well, perhaps I was too enthusiastic." But again, the River Lord says justice has to be done. So Oscar accepts Willem Blackwood's fealty and then commands him to be seized and says he has to be brought to justice. And then presents him to Daemon to mete out that justice and sort of rectify his grievous error. William pleads, "I was faithful." Daemon beheads him.
Yeah. This point, it was not just heads that were rolling.
We'll talk about it in the changes.
That, yes. And later on, we have Daemon wandering through Harrenhal, passing a black goat.
Black Phillip.
And in his bedroom, he finds Viserys once again. And this is Viserys in his last year, sickly and failing. Daemon sits beside Viserys, who is holding the crown, and Viserys admits that he never wanted it, and it just causes pain and crushes those who wear the crown. And he tells Daemon that, you always wanted it, and do you still want it? And he holds out the crown to him.
In King's Landing, Orwell is trying to help Aegon's recovery by helping him to walk. Doesn't go well, and the king falls and crying out in pain, and Larys enters and admonishes Orwell for trying to help him all by himself. He helps the king to his bed. He's in agony, and he praises his progress, says, "You have to work harder." He admits the king will have to adjust to how he is, but he can do it. And then he takes Orwell aside and tells him, "You have to be more cautious." And Orwell says, "Look, I'm pushing him just as you told me to." And then Larys says, "Well, in fact, you have to try more, not less," despite Orwell's belief that Aegon needs more rest. It's very clear that he wants Aegon back on his feet and
back on the throne.
Back on the throne, so that Aemon as regent is not at all to his liking, and that's an interesting angle, and it kind of shows.
I do like that interplay between Larys and Aemon. That is a good political.
Yeah,
interplay.
Larys is interesting because there's the political angle, and Larys is a character who, in Fire and Blood, seems to vacillate sometimes unexpectedly between the sides. And I think they've done a good job of kind of showing why that, from the perspective of the chroniclers, why that might seem to be. That he's playing this game of ambition, but as the winds turn, he kind of has to.
And he does not want anyone who's too strong on the throne. At Driftmark, Corlys approaches Alan and puts him in charge of hiring fishing boats for a task in King's Landing, including carrying a secret message from the Queen. Then Corlys tells Alan that his brother Adam is the new dragon rider. And Corlys says that, the Velaryons were never dragon lords, but he supposes that, the mother must have been a dragon seed, and implies that perhaps Alan should try his luck as well. Alan says that he's of salt and sea and yearns for nothing more. So
that one left me scratching my head a bit, but we'll discuss that as well.
We'll discuss that.
We're back in the Vale, and Rhaena and Rhaenyra's sons are beginning to leave the Vale, with a rather stern Jane Arryn watching them leave silently before having the bloody gates shut. Honestly, I wondered, like, did something more happen between scenes, because she seemed like not at all happy with this.
It kind of looked like she was throwing them out and closing the gates.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, look, the little dragons were not what she wanted, but it's a little strange. But Reyna suddenly decides to go exploring on her own, and she finds a great big patch of burned earth with the remains of a burnt sheep. I'm going to say it's a sheep at this point. And that's the last we see as she's climbing this hill. It's like
And the rest kept marching on, so I think they've forgotten about her.
Yeah, no one's looking for her. It's a bit odd, and but I presume we won't see her again this episode, so we'll see next episode.
Yeah, and then speaking of odd things, in the Kingswood, Alicent is riding alone and joins as Sir Rickard prepares a meal, and she tells him that she'll retire to a tent for the night. So she's gone camping, basically. And when asked when she means to return to King's Landing, she says she isn't sure she will.
So she's just having a sulk, basically?
Well, she's moved out into the woods, and she's going to commune with nature.
Here's an interesting scene. Jacaerys goes to Rhaenyra and is very upset by this plan to have low-born dragon seeds try to claim the dragons. He raises the point that, his claiming of Vermax has been proof that he was a true Targaryen, not the base-born son of Sir Harwin Strong, which he finally acknowledges. He knows he's not an idiot. And now, what he says, like, did you expect me to have dark hair? Did you know I would have dark hair, like Sir Harwin? And now, if any low-born person can disclaim a dragon, it calls into question his claim. As is the fact that maybe some silver-haired, base-born dragon rider will say, well, I am more of a Targaryen than you are, and will fight for the throne. Well, Rhaenyra says the gods have laid this path before her, and she can't avoid it, and that does not satisfy Jace at all.
No, he's quite unhappy about that.
I thought it was an interesting sequence. It's not a book thing, but it's a sort of thing you can see where, okay, chroniclers might not show it, but on the other hand, Jace is sort of the leading voice for this process, so they have flipped things around a bit. He has no questions that he is going to be her heir. So
yes, and I mean he's her heir. The fact that he should have been Laenor's son shouldn't really matter in that sense. The dragon riding and the inheritance comes from his mother.
Yeah.
Anyway, we now have a message making its way from Mysaria to Alan and to a fishing boat captain, and ultimately to Linda Massey, Rhaenyra's handmaiden in King's Landing. And she proceeds to read the message and make her way through the city, speaking with various people. And in the tavern, Ulf learns that Rhaenyra's handmaiden is recruiting Targaryen bastards to go to Dragonstone to claim a dragon. And Ulf kind of gets cold feet now and tries to beg off, saying, I can't be sure that I'm actually...
this old wound of mine in my leg.
I'm not up for this. But his friends start pressuring him and openly starting a cheer, calling him Ulf the Dragon Lord. So
we also see that Hugh has heard this news and can't ignore it. He never knew his own father, but his mother was a prostitute who was very popular for her silver hair. Hugh's and Ulf's connection to Targaryens is assumed. It is not known. They don't say it. And in the course of conversations, it turns out, yes, his daughter has died. Between episodes, he couldn't protect his wife, couldn't keep his daughter alive, and now he has a chance to never want again if he could claim a dragon. And then we see him later, and Ulf, and many other potential dragon scenes, going to a beach where boats await them to take them away to Dragonstone. I wonder how many people said, geez, I can get out of the city where they're telling us not to go by, I mean, that,
put on a blonde wig.
Yeah, but let me waltz out. I mean, there was this whole thing about you're not allowed to get out, and now they are able to get out. But presumably, we see there are some gold cloaks who are in on this, who I can just claim, hey, I'm a dragon seed, and then get a free ride to some place where there's food and opportunity. There should be a lot of people who kind of arrive with, I'm not really a dragon seed, but I can work. I can the whole shit, fish around or make boats or whatever. But okay, anyway, it was an interesting approach of how they did it. But it does turn things from where most of the dragon seeds are from Dragonstone and turn into most of them coming from King's Landing.
And that is a bit odd.
We see Alicent wandering alone to a lake or maybe a river as she goes swimming, floating in the water and giving us her very best impression of Ophelia. It's an interesting image. I'm not quite sure what's going on there.
I really don't know what Alicent is doing right now, but
treading water. Is quite literally treading water at the moment, and she is.
That's what it is.
You see, you have to think it through. The mind of the writer.
Now the dragon seeds arrive at Dragonstone, and the dragon keepers argue against giving these lowborn men and women the chance to claim a dragon. They are quite offended by it seems.
Yeah.
But Rhaenyra insists on her course, and the dragon keepers sullenly march out.
And we don't participate.
Nope. And Rhaenyra informs the dragon seeds that she now feels that she no longer understands what it takes to claim a dragon, that maybe it's the blood, or worth, or something else. But she's giving the opportunity to try, and she admits that some may not survive the claiming of a dragon, and she tells them if it works, and if they claim dragons, they may have a bloodless victory. And the plan is to first try and claim Vermithor, the Bronze Fury.
All the dragon seeds move down together to the cavern where Vermithor comes forward at Rhaenyra's call. And finally, they have, a silver-haired man steps up to try and claim the dragon. Rhaenyra steps back, away with her guards and others, leaving the dragon seeds to it. Vermithor rejects the man, burns him alive, and, well, a lot of her people. Pandemonium ensues. Ulf is knocked down into the pit below, while Hugh narrowly avoids death. And Rhaenyra watches it all from, another level further away, and she's seeing her hopes dying in front of her.
Ulf tries to find his way out, while on the level above him, Hugh tries to find his way to safety, seeing men and women being burnt alive and others being eaten by the dragon. They clearly should have fed him something before, I think.
Yeah, he's hungry.
He's
a big boy.
He's a big boy. So he tries to sneak past Vermithor with another dragon seed, and when the dragon notices him and tries to eat the woman he's with, Hugh pushes her out of the way and then draws the dragon's attention to him.
Very brave guy.
Yeah, very brave, and Vermithor roars, and Hugh roars back at it, ready to die, and the dragon stops and sniffs him, and he's able to reach out and touch its snout, and it seems Vermithor has accepted him. I guess he liked somebody who
very, very spectacular sequence with the dragon kind of, the mayhem and the pandemonium.
But not the best way of doing it.
No, that's the thing.
Maybe they should have taken a cleave from the fact that Rhaenyra backed off.
Yeah, I understand for the story efficiency of the story, having them all at one go makes for one big rather than it would seem almost comical. You send somebody in, you hear a scream, and then next. So I can understand it, but
that is a low budget version where they just send them into the dragon. You hear
a roar, smoke. Yeah,
another Wilhelm scream, another Wilhelm scream.
Down below, Ulf finds his way into a dragon's cavern and steps into a pile of dragon droppings and finds a very large dragon, Silverwing, in front of him. Terrified, he stands before it and it knocks him over with its snout, and the dragon follows him as he crawls away and sniffs at him deeply, and then kind of lowers down as if inviting him to get into the saddle on his back. And Ulf starts smiling.
Yeah, that was a nice dragon. In King's Landing, meanwhile, Aemon is learning of the slow progress of Ormond Hightower's host due to threats from House Beesbury, whose lord, if you'll remember, was brutally killed by Criston Cole last season. So Hightower and the allies are moving slowly, but at least Tessarion is now flying, and Daeron hopes to join the fighting soon. And then there's a commotion from the city, including the ringing of a bell, and which explains why there's a dragon being sighted, and it's Ulf, who's wildly flying Silverwing over the city, barely in control over the dragon. It looks like quite the joyride. And Aemon rushes out of the city walls and to find Vhagar out in the countryside, and we see Vhagar giving chase to Ulf, and Ulf and Silverwing racing away east to Dragonstone.
Vhagar draws nearer and nearer, and then Aemon turns the dragon away, forcing it back. And we see why, as Silverwing lands on the citadel. Rhaenyra and Syrax await, and so does Hugh on Vermithor.
And then we have changes for this episode, and there's a few. We remarked a little bit on some of the oddities there with Corlys's reactions and so on, because the idea that I mean, there are no Valorian dragon riders prior to Rhaenys' children. It's true. But the Valorians have had Targaryen brides before that. Valenna Valorian, mother to Aegon the Conqueror, Visenya and Rhaenys, was herself half Targaryen. And it is generally believed that the first master of ships, Daemon Valerian, was either her brother or her nephew, and that Corlys is ultimately descended from him. And there may be other previous connections that have not been recorded. So it seems very improbable that they have no dragon blood. Yeah. So why Corlys would say that we are no dragon riders and it must be your mother.
I mean, that part can be true, that we are not dragon riders.
Well, yes, I mean, the Valarians are not dragon lords, but the idea that they
we have no Targaryen blood, like they've mentioned that there have been connections between the... it's very odd to kind of to say, oh, well, it can't be my blood. It must be from your mother.
I feel that perhaps this is a little bit of them having an attempt at some like these watertight lines between the Valarians and the Targaryens because of the casting decisions that they made with the Valarians.
Yeah, that could be it. It could be a part of it. It's a bit odd. The execution of a Blackwood by Daemon. Now that one, this part of the story, I have to admit, all of this stuff, his essentially failing to achieve anything. If you think about it, I mean, Joffrey could have captured Harrenhal as far as it goes. Anyone could have captured Harrenhal. He doesn't do anything. Everything else he's done is just cause problems and have these visions. And now he basically has to be rescued by Oscar, who eviscerates him, who in the process. This is nowhere to be found in the book.
No.
In fact, when he arrives and the Blackwoods are doing their thing, the Blackwoods join him and Midori's and the Freys in taking Stonehenge and seizing control of forcing the Brackens to bend the knee. This is a very different account. This is not an account that can be, well, the chroniclers got it wrong. This is another alternate history.
Yeah.
It's some similar rhythms, but the instruments are different.
I mean, I understand, like, I've said it all along, that they felt essentially, well, Daemon's more or less just going to be sitting at Harrenhal. After capturing Stonehenge, then... Yes, I said Henge.
Okay, because it could be Stonehenge. I thought you said Henge, but...
it's possible.
That'd be quite amazing if you managed to capture Stonehenge.
You never know. You never know. But anyway, that stone thing. After managing that, things are relatively sedate. We don't hear much from him. He's holding Harrenhal.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't make for a very interesting story. So fine, the Harrenhal haunted house experience was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think they took it a little too far. That it was a little too much of it. I liked it for some episodes. I thought it started getting a little repetitive, but that was all.
I admit, seeing like Patty in 2 episodes again was a surprise, but at the same time, it's like, is it one time too many?
I mean, it felt like Daemon could have been awake a little bit at least, and then this complete turnaround, like saying that he's been completely ineffectual. Actually, worse, it's not that he hasn't done anything; he's made things actively worse.
He achieved nothing. I mean, he made it. I find it. I was thinking about, like, I would have met them like halfway of like twisting this so that he has partially messed things up and Oscar has to do some diplomacy to get the River Lords on side, but to have him just completely eviscerate him in front of everybody, and Daemon, they can't do anything. It's possible that we will see Daemon get his revenge later, but they'll do that. He'll get his own back later, I suppose.
But what are they doing about the Blackwoods?
But then there's the Blackwoods question. The Blackwoods, the simple thing they'll do is say, oh, well, none of us like Willem anyways, and they'll just take this huge insult to her house, lying down, or they could just drop the Blackwoods being involved.
Either is stupid. First of all, Blackwoods
we don't know yet, but we don't.
Yes, but Blackwoods don't take those sort of insults.
They've been feuding for 1,000 years with these people. Yeah, they probably would not take it lying down. They would do something.
No,
it just doesn't make any.
Trust me, I play a half Blackwood on a game. You don't insult the Blackwoods.
Yeah.
And then the idea that they're going to cut out the Blackwood characters that should be showing up. Like, come on, they're some of the best characters.
I don't know. They'll probably just have them, but it just won't make a lot of sense to me. I don't know. I said I would even 70% of the way, like, mostly have Daemon mess it up. But this public dressing down, it just was a step too far. And Daemon, Daemon's the true Targaryen. He's the dragon.
Yeah,
He would get his revenge. He would not accept this.
He literally
or he would have done something smart, like justice is that this man is no longer worthy to be your vassal. He's my vassal now. Or send him to the wall. They did that with the Kingsguard.
Yeah,
have him come up with the same idea. It was a great mirroring of Aemond having the same thought.
No, that's true.
At least he would have done something that didn't go quite so far as just completely being eviscerated and then forced to kill a guy who did nothing but be faithful to him. It's like the humiliation of it is so enormous. It goes. Now they'll say, "Oh, he's so discombobulated by Harrenhal. He's so messed up, but he can't hack it. He can't."
I guess it's good that Rhaenyra is now sleeping with Mysaria because Daemon's got no balls left.
Yeah, he was emasculated. To me, that's the biggest. To me, this is a shock. This is the biggest. This is the most unexpected and shocking thing for me, and I can see how it flows from the narrative they've constructed, but I can't see how it flows with the Daemon that George talks about as equal parts good and bad, heroic and villainous. His favorite Targaryen, possibly ever, but certainly in Fire and Blood.
Yeah.
Including over Jaehaerys, who happens to share George's birth date. Yeah, I was very surprised by this. This one made me very, I'm still wrapping my head around it. The show's very good in a lot of ways, but sometimes they just go. Sometimes there are things that I wouldn't have gone that far. I can see the argument for it. Again, 50% of the way, 60% of the way, it just goes. They take it there and then they go past where I'm comfortable. But hey, they've got a bigger audience. We'll be very interested to see what other people have to say about this. Of course, Alicent does not actually vanish from the Red Keep and go moping about the Kingswood. They seem to not know what to do with her. I assume there's some plan. Something's gonna happen. Why? Her seeking out Rickard Thorne, in particular, makes kind of sense in that he plays a role in Fire and Blood which he can't play right now because, well, a character doesn't exist, but maybe he'll play that role with her, and will be going somewhere else with her. I could see that because then the idea is it will give her a different cast of characters to interact with. Although it also calls into question Aemon summoning somebody, Otto, because I think maybe that's what's going to happen. She's going to decide to go and join her father, who decides to reject coming up to King's Landing. He's not going to get summoned by Aemond.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all very.
I think she's just out camping and communing with nature.
Yeah.
Now, not quite a change, but there's really no evidence that or references to the idea of Laras trying to hasten Aegon's recovery because his brewing disaffection with Aemon. But Fire and Blood doesn't really say anything on the topic, and the way they played it up, it certainly makes sense in the context of the story that he has been able to handle Aegon in a very good way. Aegon has bought into his act, and Aemon does not buy into the act of the Toad.
So we get passing mention of House Beesbury causing problems for Ormond's march. This is absolutely correct to the Fire and Blood. They are vassals, properly speaking, to House Hightower. But Lord Lyman was brutally killed by Criston Cole last season when he objected to usurping Rhaenyra. In Fire and Blood, not only do we have the different accounts of what happened, that he Cole slit his throat, or shoved him out a window, or Hightower had him arrested and sent to the Black Cells, where he died. But we learn that his heir, Sir Alan Beesbury, demanded to know what became of his father, and when no answer was provided, or no satisfactory answer was provided, he and allies like Lord Alan Tarley started a campaign of harassment against the Hightowers, attacking camps, setting fires to slow the march, killing scouts, and so on. In fact, the two Allans, as they're called, and their allies, caused such a stir and siding with Rhaenyra ends up kind of causing Materials to decide, you know what, we don't really want to get involved. So it's actually quite a significant impact.
Yep.
We haven't heard word of the Materials yet, of what they're doing on the show.
No, but we've had the hint that Alicent wanted Otto to go to Highgarden and make sure that.
And now she's not hearing anything. Yeah, and now she's not hearing anything. So
they're setting up that.
And on to dragon lore, and here we have two big dragons have been claimed, Vermithor and Silverwing, and I thought we'd discuss their backgrounds for those who don't know, because they really don't talk about them. And actually, Ryan kind of mentioned Silverwing's previous writer being kind of significant.
True. Vermithor, who's the one who's claimed first by Hugh, is called the Bronze Fury, and at this time the dragon is around 95 years old. He hatched in 34 AC, and he is the beginning of the custom that we mentioned earlier in the episode here of placing an egg in the cradle. It was Rhaena Targaryen, the daughter of Aenys I, who placed Vermithor's egg in the cradle of her infant brother Jaehaerys. And by 48 AC, he'd already grown quite large and was the third largest Targaryen dragon at the time, after Balerion and Vhagar. Yeah. So he grew fast. And Jaehaerys was his only rider until his death in 103 AC. The name is interesting. It is a little reminiscent of the Vermithrax pejorative, the dragon in the fantasy film Dragon Slayer that George has admired. And I don't know if George put that name in there after they did the little play in...
Well, it's after, certainly.
It is after. So, whether that influenced him.
Yeah.
Because when they have Viserys...
In Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, Viserys rattling off a list of dragons while he's in the bath with Dorea.
Yeah.
He mentions Vermithrax.
Yeah.
They threw that in as a...
Yeah, I look back at the name of that one as well, because they gave names like Giscar and they've made no attempt to say, oh, well, George, we'll try and align it with the Game of Thrones canon by changing some of these dragon names. Like, Arax could have been named Giscar, and They've decided to just forget those dragons.
But yes, we got a Vermithor.
Yeah.
Maybe out of that.
And then we have Silverwing, like Vermithor, was hatched from an egg that Princess Rhaena placed in the cradle of her little sister, Alysanne. By 48 AC, Alysanne was already riding Silverwing, so about 12 years. And flew her quite often, notably when in 56 AC, she and her husband, Jaehaerys, and brother, decided to mostly house their dragons at the Dragon Pit. Silverwing and Vermithor remained in the yards of Red Keep to be kept closer to Jaehaerys and Alysanne, who must have been quite crowded as Vermithor grew. But 2 years later, they went on their royal progress to the north. This is the show in the first episode kind of has bastardized the history of this. But in 58 AC, they traveled up and they feasted with Lord Stark. And she ended up flying onto the wall on her own. This is the famous incident where she tried to fly over it with Silverwing 3 times, and 3 times the dragon refused. And then she actually helped the Night's Watch to fund a new castle when they needed to abandon the Night Fort. There's also the village of Queen's Crown that painted its holdfast crenels gold because she stayed there for a night, or stopped there. She last rode a dragon in 93 AC. She felt too decrepit and weak to ride any longer at that point, and she died at 100 AC as the very last rider until now, that is.
So they're kind of a pair.
Yeah, they are. And Ryan talked a lot about Silverwings. We don't really get a great look at the saddle yet. There's a little bit, but he thought that his favorite prop of the show was this season was probably the amount of detail put into Silverwing's saddle and how it sort of... He told them, well, the saddle was made for Alysanne, and he sort of told them about her, and it's kind of, it's a saddle fit for a queen.
Yeah. You don't switch them out on the dragons.
No, and also I should have realized this probably means that they haven't yet made Vermithor's saddle, because we see Hugh at quite a distance and really small. I don't think we see the saddle at all during unless it's a big CG shape in the shadows.
That's true. They wouldn't have to do that. Yeah.
So I think they'll be doing it for the 3rd season.
Because basically they're on the dragons all the time.
That's what he explained. The idea is that they put these mounting bolts into the dragons that stay kind of fixed permanently into their flesh, and as they grow, the levers change, but you don't, and then but the saddle is ultimately attached and stays the same size. And
it's very awkward to take the saddle on and off the dragon.
Eventually there's a point in time where the saddle just
you don't want to unsaddle Waggar and try and get back on her.
But really, a lot of thought. I like that. But he and the teams of people, just Jim, Clay, and the various props people really put a lot of thought into this. And this is part of his, I think, his love of props that he likes thinking about, like how and why does this work this way.
Yeah.
So very cool.
I also thought of another thing now that we discussed these two dragons, since I saw you were answering a question earlier today, I think it was on Twitter, about the names of the dragons.
Oh, yeah.
Where somebody
it's very interesting,
some of the dragons have, very fantasy names, and others
Blue Sky, actually, yes.
Had more My Little Pony names, and I suppose Silverwing and Moon Dancer and Dreamfire might sound a little My Little Pony-ish.
But there just seems to be either they're named Valyrian names, in particular the big three, and Syrax, they're all named after gods. Possibly some of the others are named after Valyrian gods that we just haven't been told, or they're Valyrian style names or words. And then we have this sort of creeping appearance of the
descriptive names in English, right?
Yeah.
And obviously Silverwing and Dreamfire are named by women. I don't know if that plays into. But
Stormcloud.
But have Sea Smoke and Stormcloud,
but are not named by women. So
but they seem to have started it.
That we know of. Maybe there's some dragons that we don't know of.
But the first one would be Silverwing, wouldn't it? Or no, Dreamfire.
Dreamfire. Well, actually, Quicksilver, who was not named by.
No, that's true. Quicksilver.
Quicksilver would be, and Dreamfire would be earlier.
Yeah, and then whether you can trace the.
Well, it's actually interesting because you trace versus period, but the children of Inus go with non-Valyrian names, and then you get Jaehaerys and his sister Alysanne mixing. Where he goes with a sort of Valyrian or Valyrian-like name. You don't know really. And then we have Silverwing.
Yeah, I mean the axe names are the.
And then we get
the most obvious.
We get Tyraxes and Malaise, which there's a turn back to sort of Valyrian names.
Tyrax, Arax.
And I mean those are kind of the dragons of Rhaenyra's children, but then there's later going to be Stormcloud is also, and it's interesting, but there's this
whether they look at the dragon's parents. I mean, Tyrax and Araxes could very well be from Syrax clutches, for example.
Yeah.
Silverwing is maybe related.
I don't know. I know people. People have made
family trees
trying to figure it out. But it's interesting. I've never really thought about it. It might be.
And obviously, we've seen, if we now digress into dragon family trees, we've seen speculations that the eggs that Rhaena had with her to the Vale and then taking to Pentos would be Dany's eggs.
Yeah, the fact that they're going to Pentos is the change here, and that kind of is part of. And they've said some of the people behind the scenes that they're going to be Dany's egg. So this is not.
That is definitely a change.
That would be a change, but it is something said outside of the text. So I don't know, but if that's their intention. It is a change because it's not Syrax's eggs.
No.
Yeah. Until we got. One last episode. We'll see what happens in that one.
And then we got a few things to wrap up, and obviously we're probably going to end on another cliffhanger. Would be my guess. Of
I honestly don't, because it's at 8 and they had to kind of reconfigure things, and I know that there was probably some battle that got moved. I really don't know exactly what they're going to finish on.
No.
It'll be interesting to see. Until then.
Yeah.